I'm in a hospital bed. Injured but conscious. Outside my room, I hear my daughter Sarah laugh. It would have been so convenient if the accident had been worse. I reach for my phone. And I record everything. That was their first mistake.
Hello, my beautiful sisters. Where are you listening from? Drop your city in the comments below. And if this story touches your heart, please leave a like.
I'm 72 years old, and I've always believed that family is everything. My name is Eleanor Carter. My husband James and I raised 4 children in a beautiful home in Marietta, Georgia. We gave them everything: private schools, college tuition, down payments on their first homes. When they stumbled, we caught them. When they failed, we lifted them up. We thought that's what parents do. We thought they loved us. We were wrong. The accident happened on a Tuesday afternoon in late September. James and I were driving home from the grocery store when a delivery truck ran a red light at the intersection of Roswell Road and Powers Ferry. The impact wasn't severe. Our car spun 180 degrees and ended up on the median. My shoulder hurt from the seatbelt. James had a cut above his eyebrow from where his glasses broke. The paramedics insisted we go to the hospital for observation. Standard procedure, they said. We didn't argue. At our age, you don't take chances with head injuries. Wellstar Kennestone Hospital, room 314. They kept us overnight for monitoring. Nothing serious. Mild concussions, bruising. The doctor said we'd be discharged the next morning. James fell asleep around 8 p.m. I was reading a book when my phone buzzed. A text from our oldest daughter, Denise. Mom, are you okay? Michael just told me about the accident. We're all coming to the hospital. I smiled. My children, rushing to see us. Of course they were worried. I texted back. We're fine, honey. Just minor bumps. No need to come tonight. Visit tomorrow. But 30 minutes later, I heard voices in the hallway outside our room. All 4 of them: Denise, Michael, Marcus, and Sarah. I was about to call out when I heard Denise's voice. Sharp. Excited. Did you see how old they looked in the photos Michael sent? My hand froze on the blanket. Mom's hair is completely gray now, Sarah said. And Dad can barely walk without that cane. They're 72 and 74, Marcus added. How much longer can they really last? I felt my chest tighten. James stirred beside me but didn't wake. I should have called out. I should have opened the door and confronted them. But something stopped me. Some instinct. Some terrible curiosity about what they would say next. The inheritance is $40 million, Michael said. His voice was steady, businesslike. Mom inherited the farmland from her parents back in the 80s. Dad's pension and investments. The house in Marietta is worth at least $2.5 million now. Split 4 ways, that's $10 million each, Denise said. Silence. Then Sarah laughed. Actually laughed. I was wondering how we were going to pay for the new house. This is perfect timing. It's not perfect timing, Marcus said. They're still alive. I know that, Sarah snapped. I'm just saying, it would have been worse if this happened 5 years from now when we really needed it. I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the blanket to steady them. These were my children. The babies I nursed. The toddlers I held when they cried. The teenagers I stayed up late worrying about. And they were standing outside my hospital room discussing my death like it was a business transaction. The question is the will, Michael said. Do we know if it's updated? Dad mentioned something about a trust last Christmas, Marcus said. But I don't think they've changed anything recently. We need to make sure they don't, Denise said. If they start talking about donating to charity or setting up some foundation, we need to shut that down immediately. How? Sarah asked. We stay close, Denise said. We visit more often. We act concerned about their health. We make them feel loved so they don't get any ideas about cutting us out. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw open the door and tell them exactly what I thought of their disgusting conversation. But I didn't, because another thought was forming in my mind. A cold, clear thought that cut through my shock and rage like a blade. They want to wait for me to die. They want my money. They don't love me. They never did. And if they're willing to talk like this now, what will they do when James and I get older? Weaker? I reached for my phone. My hands were still shaking, but I managed to open the voice recording app. Georgia is a one-party consent state. That means I can legally record a conversation as long as I'm present or have knowledge of it. And I was present, just on the other side of a door. I pressed record. I'm just saying, Sarah continued, it would have been so convenient if the accident had been worse. Jesus, Sarah, Marcus said. Don't say that out loud. Why not? We're all thinking it. Maybe you're thinking it, Michael said. But some of us have a conscience. Oh please, Sarah said. You're the one who calculated the inheritance down to the dollar. Don't act like you're better than me. Silence. Then Denise spoke. Her voice was softer now. Almost gentle. Look, we're not wishing them dead. We're just being realistic. They're old. This accident is a wake-up call. We need to be prepared. Prepared for what? Marcus asked. For everything, Denise said. Medical decisions, financial decisions. We need to make sure we're all on the same page when the time comes. My phone recorded every word. 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 10. They talked about splitting the estate, about selling the house, about whether James's pension would transfer, about who would get which pieces of furniture. They talked about us like we were already dead. Finally, they stopped. We should probably go in and see them, Michael said. Do we have to? Sarah asked. I'm exhausted. Yes, we have to, Denise said. We need to look concerned. Loving, remember? Footsteps approached the door. I stopped the recording and shoved my phone under my pillow. Then I closed my eyes and pretended to sleep. The door opened. Mom? Dad? Denise's voice. Sweet. Worried. I didn't move. They're sleeping, Michael whispered. We should come back tomorrow. Let's just leave a note, Sarah said. I heard paper rustling, a pen scratching, then the door closed again. Silence. I lay there in the dark for a long time. James snored softly beside me. I thought about our life together. 47 years of marriage. 4 children, 8 grandchildren, a beautiful home, enough money to live comfortably. We did everything right. We loved them, supported them, sacrificed for them, and this was how they repaid us. I reached under my pillow and pulled out my phone. The recording was still there. 11 minutes and 43 seconds. I listened to it again, just to make sure I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't. Every word was clear, every laugh, every calculation. It would have been so convenient if the accident had been worse. I saved the recording to 3 different cloud accounts. Then I opened a new note on my phone and began to type. Evidence log day 1. I wrote down everything. The date, the time, the names of everyone who spoke. Exact quotes where I could remember them. This wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. This was about something else. Something I'd never felt before in my 72 years of life. Rage. Pure, cold, calculating rage. They wanted my money? They wanted me dead? Fine. But they were going to learn a very important lesson first. You don't betray Ellie Carter and walk away unscathed. James woke up around midnight. Ellie, you're still awake? I looked at him. My husband of 47 years. The father of my children. The man I'd built a life with. He deserved to know the truth. But not yet. Not until I had a plan. Just thinking, I said softly. About the accident? About family. He smiled and took my hand. We're lucky, aren't we? 4 beautiful children. They're probably worried sick about us. I squeezed his hand. Yes, I said. We're very lucky. The next morning, a nurse came in to check our vitals. Your children left a note, she said cheerfully. She handed me a folded piece of paper. I opened it. Mom and Dad, so sorry we missed you. We were here late but you were both sleeping. We love you so much. Call us when you're discharged. XOXO, Denise, Michael, Marcus and Sarah. I stared at the note for a long time. 4 signatures, 4 lies. I folded it carefully and put it in my purse. Evidence log day 1. Item 2. We were discharged at 11 a.m. James wanted to call the kids to let them know we were home safe. Not yet, I said. I'm exhausted. Let's just rest today. He agreed. That afternoon, while James napped, I sat at my desk in the study. I opened my laptop and began to research. Estate planning, trusts, legal protections, Georgia inheritance law, and something else, revenge. Not the kind that lands you in jail. The kind that's legal, calculated, devastating, the kind that destroys someone's life without ever breaking a single law. By the time James woke up, I had a plan. It would take time, months, maybe longer. But I had time, because unlike my children, I wasn't in a hurry for anyone to die. That night, I listened to the recording one more time. Sarah's voice echoed in my ears. It would have been so convenient if the accident had been worse. I closed my laptop and looked out the window at the darkening sky. You want convenient? I whispered to the empty room. Let me show you what convenient really looks like. Chapter 2: The Last Insult and the Move. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of watching my children play their roles perfectly. They called every day. Concerned voices asking about our recovery. Sweet text messages with heart emojis. Invitations to family dinners. I played along. James thought everything was wonderful. See, he said, the accident brought us closer together. I smiled and nodded, but every night, I added to my evidence log. It was James's 75th birthday on a Saturday in October. Denise insisted on hosting a family dinner at her house in Buckhead. Dad deserves something special, she said on the phone. We'll make it perfect. James was thrilled. I packed the recording device I'd purchased online into my purse. A small digital recorder disguised as a pen. Legal in Georgia. Admissible in court. I was building a case now. Not for court. Not yet. But for something else. We arrived at Denise's house at 6 p.m. The place was massive. 5 bedrooms. Pool in the backyard. Worth at least $3 million. Denise and her husband bought it 2 years ago. We gave them $400,000 for the down payment. She greeted us at the door with a hug. Happy birthday, Dad. Michael and his wife were already there. Marcus arrived 10 minutes later with his girlfriend. Sarah came last, still in her work clothes. The table was set beautifully. Candles, flowers, James's favorite meal pot roast with mashed potatoes. He was beaming. This is wonderful, he said. All my children together. I activated the recording pen in my purse. Dinner started pleasantly enough. Small talk about work. Stories about the grandchildren. Michael told a funny story about his son's soccer game. Then, between the main course and dessert, it happened. Marcus cleared his throat. So, Dad, Mom, we wanted to talk to you about something. James looked up from his plate. What's that, son? It's about your estate planning. The room went quiet. I felt my jaw tighten. But I kept my face neutral. Curious. What about it? James asked. Marcus glanced at Denise. She nodded. We just want to make sure everything is organized, Marcus said carefully. You know, in case something happens. Nothing's going to happen, James said with a laugh. I'm 75, not 90. We know, Dad, Denise said quickly. But after the accident, we've been thinking. It's important to have everything documented properly. It is documented, I said quietly. 4 pairs of eyes turned to me. Mom's right, James said. We updated our wills 3 years ago. Everything goes into a trust. It's all handled. But have you thought about medical power of attorney? Michael asked. What if something happens and you can't make decisions? We have advance directives, I said. Both of us. Who's listed? Sarah asked. Too quickly. Too eagerly. I looked at her. Our attorney. Silence. Your attorney? Denise repeated. Not one of us? We didn't want to burden you, James said simply. Marcus leaned forward. Dad, it's not a burden. We're family. We should be the ones making those decisions. Why? I asked. The question hung in the air. Marcus blinked. What do you mean why? Why should you make medical decisions for us? Because we love you, Sarah said. I smiled. Do you? The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Mom, Denise said carefully. Of course we love you. What kind of question is that? A reasonable one, I said. Given the circumstances. What circumstances? Michael asked. I looked at James. He was confused. Uncomfortable. I could tell them. Right now. Play the recording from the hospital. But I didn't. Because this wasn't the moment. Not yet. Nothing, I said lightly. Forget I said anything. But the damage was done. The rest of dinner was tense. Sarah kept checking her phone. Marcus barely spoke. Denise tried to keep the conversation going, but her voice was too bright. Too forced. When dessert came out, a chocolate cake with 75 candles, James made a wish and blew them out. I wondered what he wished for. I already knew what I wanted. After cake, Denise pulled me aside in the kitchen. Mom, are you okay? You seem off tonight. I rinsed a plate and placed it in the dishwasher. I'm fine, sweetheart. You're sure? Because that comment at dinner. What comment? About whether we love you. I turned to face her. She was 38 years old. Beautiful, successful. She ran her own marketing firm. And she was standing in a $3 million house, asking me if I was okay, while secretly hoping I'd die soon. Do you? I asked softly. Do I what? Love me, Mom. She looked genuinely hurt. Of course I do. How can you even ask that? I studied her face. She was good. Really good. If I hadn't heard that conversation at the hospital, I would have believed her completely. I'm sorry, I said. I think the accident shook me more than I realized. Relief flooded her features. That's understandable. Trauma does weird things to your brain. Maybe you should talk to someone. A therapist. Maybe, I said. We left at 9 p.m. James was quiet on the drive home. Finally, he spoke. What was that about? What was what about? At dinner. The questions about the estate. The medical power of attorney. I kept my eyes on the road. They're worried about us getting older. It felt like more than that. I glanced at him. 47 years of marriage. He knew me better than anyone. James, I said carefully. If I told you something terrible about our children, would you believe me? He was quiet for a long moment. What did they do? I pulled into our driveway and parked. The house was dark. We'd left the porch light on, but it must have burned out. I turned off the engine and sat there in the darkness. At the hospital, I said slowly. The night of the accident. They came to visit. I know. They left that note. Before they came into the room, they stood in the hallway. Talking. About what? I looked at him. About how much money they'd inherit when we die. Silence. James stared at me. You must have heard wrong. I didn't. Ellie. I recorded it. His face went pale in the dashboard light. You what? I recorded the entire conversation. 11 minutes. All four of them. Calculating the inheritance. Discussing how convenient it would have been if the accident had been worse. I pulled out my phone and opened the audio file. I pressed play. Sarah's voice filled the car. It would have been so convenient if the accident had been worse. I let it play for 2 minutes. Then I stopped it. James sat frozen. His hands were shaking. They said that? His voice cracked. Our children said that? All of them. But the note. The visits. Tonight's dinner. All fake, I said quietly. They're pretending to care so we don't cut them out of the will. James put his head in his hands. For a long moment, he didn't move. When he finally looked up, there were tears on his face. I gave them everything, he whispered. Everything, I know. How could they? He couldn't finish the sentence. I reached over and took his hand. We're going to fix this, I said. How? I looked at our house. The home we'd lived in for 40 years. The place where we'd raised our children. Where we'd celebrated Christmases and birthdays and graduations. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a prison. We're going to leave, I said. James looked at me. Leave? Everything. The house. This city. We're going to disappear. Ellie, we can't just. Yes, we can. We're going to sell this house. Move somewhere they can't find us. Change our phone numbers. Cut off all contact. They'll look for us. Let them. But our grandchildren. Our children don't love us, James. And I won't let them use us anymore. He sat back in his seat. I could see him processing. Grieving. Accepting. When? He finally asked. Soon. Within the month. Where will we go? I don't know yet. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere we can start over. He was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. Okay. If they want us dead for our money, then we'll show them what it's like to have nothing. That night, I lay awake planning. Step 1, sell the house. Quietly, quickly. Step 2, transfer all assets into accounts they couldn't access. Step 3, disappear completely. Step 4, watch them panic. Step 5, the real revenge. The next morning, I called a realtor. Not our regular one. Someone new. Someone discreet. I need to sell my house, I said. Fast. Off-market sale if possible. How fast? 3 weeks. She whistled. That's ambitious. I'll take a lower price for speed. I'll see what I can do. I called our attorney next. Robert, it's Ellie Carter. I need to make some changes to our estate plan. Of course. What kind of changes? Everything. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked in secret. James handled selling furniture and belongings. I handled the legal and financial arrangements. We told no one. Not our children. Not our friends. Not our neighbors. We simply started erasing ourselves. The house sold in 12 days. A cash buyer. a couple relocating from California. They loved the property and didn't ask questions. Closing was scheduled for the end of the month. I hired a moving company and had them pack everything we wanted to keep. 3 boxes of photos, some clothes, a few pieces of furniture with sentimental value. Everything else was sold or donated. 10 days before closing, Denise called. "Hey mom, just checking in. How are you feeling?" "Much better, honey." "Great. Listen, I wanted to invite you and dad to brunch this Sunday." "My treat. We can't make it." "Oh, why not?" "We're busy." Pause. "Busy with what?" "Just things." Another pause. Longer this time. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, sweetheart." She called back an hour later. Then Michael called. Then Marcus. Then Sarah. All of them. Suddenly concerned. Suddenly attentive. I let every call go to voicemail. 3 days before closing, I changed our phone numbers. New phones. New accounts. New email addresses. I texted each child from my old number one last time. "We're taking some time for ourselves. We'll be in touch when we're ready. Love, Mom and Dad." Then I turned off the old phones. Moving day. The truck arrived at 6 a.m. By noon, the house was empty. James stood in the living room one last time. 40 years, he said quietly. "I know. I thought we'd die here." "We almost did." He looked at me. "Do you really think this will work?" "I know it will." We drove away at 2 p.m. I didn't look back. James cried quietly in the passenger seat. I kept my eyes on the road ahead. Our new home was in Savannah. A small condo overlooking the river. 2 bedrooms. Modern. Anonymous. No one knew us here. No one knew where to find us. We were ghosts. That first night, I stood on the balcony watching the lights on the water. My phone buzzed. The new one. A text from our attorney Robert. "Estate changes filed. Trust restructured as discussed. Your children are no longer beneficiaries. Everything will go to the charities you specified." I smiled. Then I opened a bottle of wine and poured 2 glasses. James joined me on the balcony. "What are we drinking to?" he asked. I handed him a glass. "To the beginning," I said. "The beginning of what?" "Their suffering." We clinked glasses. Somewhere in Atlanta, 4 phones were ringing. 4 voicemails going unanswered. 4 children realizing their parents had vanished. And $40 million slipping through their fingers like sand. Let them panic. Let them search. Let them feel what it's like to lose everything. Because this was just the beginning. The real revenge hadn't even started yet. They found out about the house sale on a Wednesday. I know because Robert called me. "Ellie, I just got a very angry call from your daughter Denise. She's demanding to know where you are." I was sitting on my balcony in Savannah, drinking coffee and watching boats drift down the river. "What did you tell her?" "Nothing. Attorney-client privilege. But she threatened to file a missing persons report." I smiled. "Let her." That afternoon, I received an email from a private investigator named Donald Fisher. "Mrs. Carter, your children have hired me to locate you. They are very concerned about your well-being. Please contact me at your earliest convenience." I forwarded the email to Robert. "Is this legal?" I asked. "Perfectly legal. But you're under no obligation to respond. You're a competent adult. You have every right to relocate without informing anyone." Good. I deleted the email. Over the next week, Donald Fisher left 3 voicemails on my old phone. I never listened to them. James was nervous. What if they really do file a missing persons report? They won't. How do you know? Because if they involve the police will ask questions. And if the police start investigating, they might discover why we left. The recording. Exactly. I was right. No police report was ever filed. Instead, the calls and emails intensified. Denise, Michael, Marcus, Sarah, all of them desperate to find us. Not because they were worried. Because they were terrified. I let them search for 3 weeks. During that time, I studied them. Social media made it remarkably easy. Denise posted about her business constantly. Instagram photos of her office. LinkedIn updates about new clients. Michael's wife shared family photos. Their house. Their cars. Their country club membership. Marcus posted workout videos at his gym. Always the same location. Same time every morning. Sarah complained about work on Twitter. Her boss. Her commute. Her expensive tastes. They documented their entire lives online. And I took notes. I also made phone calls. Quiet calls, discreet calls, to banks, to creditors, to business partners, just asking questions, gathering information, building a complete picture of each child's financial situation. What I discovered was fascinating. Denise's marketing firm was drowning in debt. She'd taken out 3 business loans in the past 2 years. The company looked successful on Instagram, but the balance sheets told a different story. She was $60,000 behind on payments. Her biggest client had just canceled their contract. She was 3 months away from bankruptcy. Michael worked in commercial real estate. He drove a Mercedes, wore expensive suits, belonged to the most exclusive country club in Atlanta. But his income was entirely commission-based. And this year, he'd closed exactly 2 deals. His credit card debt was staggering. $140,000 across 7 cards. His mortgage payment was $8,000 a month. He was leveraged to the breaking point. Marcus was a personal trainer. He rented a small apartment in Midtown. Drove a leased BMW. Spent money like he had it. But his gym had cut his hours. He'd borrowed $15,000 from Denise last year. Never paid it back. His girlfriend just found out she was pregnant. He was barely surviving paycheck to paycheck. Sarah was the worst. She worked as a sales manager for a pharmaceutical company. Good salary, 6 figures, but she spent every penny she earned and then some. Designer clothes, luxury vacations, a ridiculous apartment in Buckhead that cost $4,000 a month. She'd already asked us for money twice this year. Once for a business opportunity that never materialized. Once for unexpected medical bills that I later discovered were credit card payments. She was a financial disaster waiting to happen. All 4 of them were dependent on our money. Not just for inheritance, for survival. Over the years, we'd given them everything. Down payments, business loans, emergency funds, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And now that the well had run dry, they were panicking. I sat in my Savannah condo and realized something important. They didn't need to wait for us to die to get our money. They were already getting it. Regular transfers, birthday gifts, Christmas checks, emergency loans that were never repaid. We'd been funding their lifestyles for years without even realizing it. And now that we'd disappeared, the money had stopped. They weren't just losing their inheritance. They were losing their lifeline. 4 weeks after we moved to Savannah, I made my first move. I called Denise's largest creditor. A bank in Atlanta that held 2 of her business loans. Hello, my name is Eleanor Carter. I co-signed on a loan for my daughter Denise Carter 3 years ago. I'd like to discuss my options for removing myself as a guarantor. The loan officer pulled up the account. I see. Yes, you're listed as a co-signer for both the business line of credit and the equipment loan. Total outstanding balance is $63,000. What happens if I remove my guarantee? The loans would need to be restructured. Your daughter would need to qualify on her own. Or she'd need to find another co-signer. And if she can't, pause. The loans would be called. Immediate payment in full. I see. Please send me the paperwork to remove my guarantee. Mrs. Carter, are you sure? This will put significant pressure on your daughter's business. I'm quite sure. I made similar calls for Michael's mortgage cosign and Marcus's car lease. Every loan, every guarantee, every financial connection, I severed them all. The letters went out on a Monday. By Wednesday, Denise received notification that her business loans were being called. $63,000, due in 30 days. She called Robert immediately. I need to speak to my mother right now. This is an emergency. I can pass along a message. Tell her the bank is calling my loans. Tell her I'll lose everything if I can't pay. Robert called me. Denise is in a panic. Good. Ellie, she's your daughter. My daughter who wished I'd died in a car accident. Silence. Point taken. Michael received his notice on Thursday. His mortgage was being restructured. Without his parents as co-signers, he no longer qualified for the loan amount. He had 60 days to refinance or sell. He called 17 times in one afternoon. I didn't answer. Marcus's car was repossessed on Friday morning, right out of his gym parking lot. He posted about it on Instagram. Worst day ever. Someone explain how a car can just be taken without warning. I almost laughed. There had been warnings. Multiple warnings. He just never opened the letters. Sarah was different. Sarah didn't have any co-signed loans. But she had something else. A trust fund. My parents had set up small trusts for each grandchild when they were born. $50,000 each. Accessible at age 35. Sarah had been counting on that money. She was 36 now. She'd already spent it in her mind. A new car, a vacation to Europe, designer furniture for her apartment. So I called the trust administrator. I'd like to redirect the funds from Sarah Carter's trust. Redirect them where? To the Savannah area homeless shelter. As a donation in my parents' name. Mrs. Carter, this is highly unusual. It's my parents' money. I have authority over the trust. Can it be done? Legally, yes. But, then please do it. Sarah found out on Monday. She called Robert screaming. Actually screaming. That money was mine. She can't just take it. Actually, she can. The trust is controlled by your grandmother's estate, which your mother administers. This is theft. It's illegal reallocation of funds. I'll sue. You'd lose. She hung up. By the end of the second month, all 4 children were in financial freefall. Denise was closing her business. Michael was selling his house. Marcus was sleeping on his girlfriend's couch. Sarah was behind on rent. And I was just getting started. One evening, James and I were having dinner on the balcony. He'd been quiet lately, processing everything. Do you ever feel guilty? He asked. I put down my fork. No, not even a little? James, they wanted us dead. They calculated our net worth while we were lying in a hospital bed. They laughed about it, I know, but they're still our children. They stopped being our children the moment they started counting our money. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, what's next? I smiled. Phase 2, which is, we make them desperate enough to come looking for us. I thought that was the point of disappearing. No, the point of disappearing was to make them panic. Now we want them to find us. Why? Because I want to see their faces when they beg. I sent a single text message to all 4 children from my new number. Short, simple. If you want to talk, you know where to find me. Then I included our new address in Savannah. The replies came within minutes. Mom, where have you been? We've been looking everywhere. Please call me, we need to talk. I'm coming down there right now. I turned off my phone. They'll be here by tomorrow, I said to James. All of them? All of them. What are you going to do? I looked out at the river. I'm going to watch them grovel. And then I'm going to say no. They arrived on a Saturday morning. 2 cars. All 4 children. They looked terrible. Denise had dark circles under her eyes. Michael had lost weight. Marcus was wearing the same clothes I'd seen him in on Instagram 3 days ago. Sarah looked like she'd been crying. They stood at our door, uncertain. I let them knock 3 times before I answered. Mom. Denise's voice cracked. Thank God. Hello, Denise. Can we come in? No. She blinked. What? I said no. Michael stepped forward. Mom, please. We need to talk. Talk from there. They stood in the hallway of my condo building. Awkward. Confused. Desperate. We've been so worried, Sarah said. Have you? Of course we have. You disappeared. You sold the house. You wouldn't answer our calls. And why do you think that is? Silence. Mom, I don't understand what's happening, Marcus said. Did we do something wrong? I almost laughed. Do you really not know? They looked at each other. Denise spoke carefully. Is this about the estate planning conversation at Dad's birthday? No. Then what? The hospital. 4 faces went pale. What about the hospital? Michael asked. I pulled out my phone and pressed play. Sarah's voice filled the hallway. It would have been so convenient if the accident had been worse. I let it play for 30 seconds. Then I stopped it. Complete silence. Denise's mouth opened but no sound came out. Michael took a step back. Marcus stared at the floor. Sarah started crying. I have 11 minutes of recording, I said calmly. All 4 of you, discussing my death like it was a business merger. Calculating your inheritance. Laughing about how convenient the timing was. Mom, we didn't mean. Denise started. Don't insult me by lying. We were scared, Michael said. Scared of what? Of losing you. You were scared of losing my money. Sarah was sobbing now. We're sorry. We're so sorry. We weren't thinking. You were thinking very clearly. In fact, you were quite detailed in your calculations. Please, Denise begged. Please, Mom, we made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But we're family. Are we? Yes. Then why did you want me dead? No one had an answer. I looked at each of them. My children. The people I'd given my life to. They looked small, pathetic, exactly how I wanted them. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to leave. You're going to go back to Atlanta. And you're going to figure out your own lives without my money. Mom, I'm losing my business, Denise said desperately. I know. Michael's losing his house, Marcus added. I know. I can't pay my rent, Sarah cried. I know. You know? Denise's voice rose. You know and you don't care? That's correct. But we're your children. You stopped being my children in that hospital hallway. Mom, please, Michael said. We'll do anything. Anything? Yes. I smiled. Then learn to survive without me. I closed the door. They stood there for 5 minutes, knocking and calling through the door. I didn't answer. Eventually, they left. James found me on the balcony an hour later. You okay? I'm perfect. That was brutal. It needed to be. What now? I sipped my wine. Now we wait. For what? For them to realize I'm serious. 3 days later, Denise's business declared bankruptcy. 1 week later, Michael's house went into foreclosure. 2 weeks later, Marcus moved back in with his ex-girlfriend. 3 weeks later, Sarah was evicted from her apartment. They called. They texted. They emailed. Begging. Pleading. Apologizing. I ignored every message. Then, exactly 1 month after they'd knocked on my door, I received a letter. Hand-delivered by courier. All 4 of them had signed it. We will do anything. Please give us one more chance. We are willing to accept any terms. I read the letter 3 times. Then I called Robert. I need you to draft a contract. What kind of contract? One that will legally bind my children to absolute obedience for the rest of my life. Pause. Ellie, are you sure about this? Completely sure. This is extreme. So was wishing for my death. Another pause. I'll draft it. The contract arrived 2 days later. 27 pages. I read every word. It was perfect. Financial guardianship. Medical authority. Approval rights over all major life decisions. They would sign over control of everything. In exchange, I would restore their access to the family trust. Not full access. Not unlimited, but enough to survive, enough to stay dependent. Forever. I sent the contract to all 4 children with a simple note. Sign this, and we'll talk. Refuse, and you'll never hear from me again. The signed contracts came back within 48 hours. All 4 of them. No negotiations. No questions. Just desperate signatures. I stood on my balcony that night, holding the signed papers. James joined me. It's done? He asked. It's done. How do you feel? I looked out at the water. Powerful. Because I'd just done something most people never get to do. I'd made my children pay for their greed. Not with money, with freedom. And this was still just the beginning. The contracts gave me power. But power without action is meaningless. I let 2 weeks pass after receiving the signed documents. 2 weeks of silence. 2 weeks of letting them wonder if I'd actually follow through. 2 weeks of watching them post increasingly desperate updates on social media. Then I made my first call. Denise. It's Mom. Silence on the other end. Then a sob. Mom. Oh my God. Thank you for calling. Thank you. We need to talk about your business. Yes. Yes, please. I can rebuild it. I just need some capital. Not much. Maybe $50,000 to start. I already have a plan. I'm not giving you $50,000. Pause. But the contract. You said. I said I would restore access to family funds. I didn't say I would fund your failed business. It's not failed. It's just going through a rough patch. Denise, you're $600,000 in debt. Silence. How do you know that? I know everything. That's the point of the contract. You signed over financial transparency. Remember? I thought that was just for new decisions. No, it's for everything. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. Mom, I made some mistakes. But I can fix this. You can't fix this with more debt. Then what am I supposed to do? Close the business. Declare bankruptcy. Get a job. A job? I'm 38 years old. I run a marketing firm. You ran a marketing firm. Past tense. Her voice turned cold. You're enjoying this, am I? Yes. You're punishing me. No, Denise. I'm teaching you. Teaching me what? That money isn't infinite. That actions have consequences. And that your parents are not an ATM. We apologized. You apologized because you got caught. She was crying now. Real crying. Not the manipulative kind. What about the contract? You said you'd help. I will help. I'm going to give you $1,500 a month. 1,500? That's not even enough for rent. Then you'll need to find a roommate. Or move to a cheaper apartment. Mom, please. $1,500 a month, Denise. Take it or leave it. Silence. Then, quietly, I'll take it. Good. The payments will begin next month. Conditional on you finding employment within 60 days. Employment doing what? I don't care. Retail, food service, administrative work, anything that generates income. You want me to work retail? I want you to understand what it's like to earn money instead of expecting it. I hung up. James was watching me from the kitchen. That was harsh. It needed to be. She's going to lose everything. Good. Maybe she'll learn to appreciate what she has instead of what she wants. 3 days later, I called Michael. Michael, it's Mom. Mom. Relief flooded his voice. Thank God. Listen, I need to talk to you about the house. I know about the house. The bank is foreclosing in 30 days. But if I can come up with $70,000 for back payments and penalties, I can keep it. You're not keeping the house. Pause. What? You're going to let it foreclose? Mom, that's my house. My family's house. My kids live there. Your family will be fine in a smaller house. We can't afford a smaller house. Our credit is destroyed. Then you'll rent. Rent? His voice rose. Do you know what you're saying? We belong to the country club. Our kids go to private school. We have a reputation. You have debt. $140,000 in credit card debt. A mortgage you can't afford. Car payments on 2 luxury vehicles. You live beyond your means, Michael. How do you know about my credit cards? Financial transparency. Remember? You signed the contract. I didn't know you'd actually use it like this. What did you think I'd use it for? Silence. Mom, please. I'm begging you. Just help me keep the house. No. Why not? You have the money. Because you need to learn that you can't buy your way out of every problem. This isn't a problem. This is my life. Exactly. Your life. Not mine. You're 41 years old, Michael. Start acting like it. What am I supposed to tell my wife? My kids? Tell them the truth. Tell them Daddy made bad financial decisions and now the family has to adjust. They'll be humiliated. Good. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Cold. You're really going to let us lose everything. I'm going to let you experience consequences. We said we were sorry. Sorry doesn't erase what you said. So this is revenge. No, Michael. This is education. I hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I felt guilty. But because I kept replaying their voices in my head. Denise crying. Michael's cold anger. James found me on the balcony at 2 a.m. Second thoughts? No. You sure? I looked at him. Do you remember when Michael was 7? He wanted a new bicycle. A red one with racing stripes. It cost $200. I remember. You told him he needed to earn it. Do chores. Save his allowance. He threw a tantrum. He said it wasn't fair that other kids got bikes without working for them. He did earn it eventually. It took him 4 months. And when he finally got that bike, he took care of it. He polished it every weekend. He locked it up every night. Because he'd worked for it. James sat down next to me. What's your point? My point is that we stopped teaching them that lesson. We started giving them everything. Bikes, cars, down payments, business loans. We thought we were helping. We were helping. No, we were enabling. Silence. They're adults now, I said. If we don't teach them now, they'll never learn. And if they hate us for it, then at least they'll survive. The next morning, I received an email from Denise. I got a job. Starbucks. Part-time. It's humiliating, but I'm doing it. I hope you're happy. I wrote back. I'm proud of you. She didn't respond. 2 days later, Michael's house officially went into foreclosure. He called me drunk. Are you happy now? We're homeless. My kids are crying. My wife won't speak to me. This is all your fault. No, Michael. This is your fault. You're the one who took out loans you couldn't afford. You're the one who maxed out credit cards. You're the one who wished I was dead so you could inherit money. I didn't mean that. Yes, you did. You all did. He hung up. But 3 days after that, I received a text from his wife Amanda. Mrs. Carter, this is Amanda. I know you and Michael aren't speaking. But I wanted you to know that we found a rental house. 3 bedrooms. The kids will have to share rooms but we'll make it work. Michael got a second job. He's working at night doing security. It's hard, but I think it's actually helping him. He's more present with the kids now. Less stressed about money because there's no more debt hanging over us. I don't know if you'll read this, but I wanted to say thank you. I read the text 5 times. James read it over my shoulder. See, he said softly. You're not destroying them. You're rebuilding them. Maybe. Do you feel better? I thought about it. I feel something. What? Hope. But the revenge wasn't finished. Denise and Michael were responding. Learning. Adjusting. Marcus and Sarah were different. Marcus and Sarah were going to fight. And I was ready for them. 1 week later, I received a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello, Mrs. Carter? This is Detective Linda Morris with the Atlanta Police Department. My blood went cold. Yes? I'm calling about a complaint filed by your son Marcus Carter. He's alleging financial elder abuse. I closed my eyes. So it was starting. Elder abuse? Yes, ma'am. He claims you've cut him off financially, taken his car, and refused to provide support despite having significant means. He's concerned about your mental state. I see. I'd like to ask you a few questions if that's okay. Am I being charged with anything? No, ma'am. This is just an inquiry. Then with all due respect, detective, I decline to answer questions without my attorney present. Pause. That's your right, Mrs. Carter. But I should tell you, your son is quite insistent. He's filed for an emergency competency evaluation. I felt rage building in my chest. Marcus was trying to have me declared incompetent. If he succeeded, he could take control of my finances. Take control of everything. Detective Morris, I'm 72 years old. I'm in excellent health. I passed a complete physical examination 2 months ago. I'm cognitively sharp. And I have documented legal reasons for my financial decisions regarding my children. What reasons? Reasons I'll be happy to share with my attorney present. Another pause. All right, Mrs. Carter. I'll note this conversation, but you should expect to hear from the court regarding the competency petition. I'll be ready. I hung up and immediately called Robert. Marcus is trying to have me declared incompetent. What? He filed for an emergency evaluation. The police just called me. That son of a bitch. Can he do this? He can file, but he won't win. Not if we present evidence that you're competent and that you have legitimate reasons for your financial decisions. The recording. Exactly. The recording from the hospital proves their motivations. And the contracts they signed prove they acknowledged their behavior. When's the hearing? I'll find out. But Ellie? Yes? This is war now. Marcus just escalated. You need to be ready. I sat down on the couch. James came over and held my hand. What did he do? He's trying to have me declared mentally incompetent so he can control my money. James's face went white, then red. Then he stood up and grabbed his phone. I'm calling him right now. James, don't. He's trying to steal from you. I know, but yelling at him won't help. Then what will? I smiled. A cold smile. Destroying him. That night, I made a list. Everything I knew about Marcus. Every weakness. Every mistake, every secret. He wanted to play dirty? Fine. I'd show him what dirty really looked like. Because Marcus had forgotten one very important thing. I wasn't just his mother. I was the woman who'd raised him. I knew every skeleton in his closet. And I was about to drag them all into the light. Marcus made a mistake. He thought I was weak. He thought I was old. He thought I wouldn't fight back. He was wrong on all 3 counts. The competency hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. That gave me time. Time to prepare. Time to gather evidence. Time to destroy my son before he could destroy me. I started with his social media. Marcus posted everything online. His workouts. His meals. His nights out. He loved showing off. But social media also told another story. A story Marcus probably thought no one was paying attention to. 6 months ago, Marcus posted a photo at a bar. Great night with the boys. He'd written, but in the background of that photo was a reflection in a mirror. Marcus, getting into a car, with a beer bottle in his hand. I scrolled back further. 2 years ago, a post about a close call on the highway. Almost got in an accident tonight. Some idiot ran a red light. Thank God I swerved in time. But the timestamp on that post was 11:47 p.m. And I remembered that night. Because Marcus had called me the next morning, asking to borrow money for car repairs. I hit a pole, he'd said. In a parking lot. He'd lied. I kept digging. 3 years ago. A deleted post. But the internet never forgets. Someone had replied to it. And that reply was still visible. Dude, you're lucky no one saw you leave the scene. Leave the scene. Hit and run. I called a private investigator. Not Donald Fisher. The one my children had hired. Someone else. Someone who didn't know my children. I need you to find police reports from 3 years ago. Atlanta area. Hit and run. Property damage. Around November. That's a lot of reports. I have a date range. November 15th through November 20th. And I have a description of the vehicle. I gave him Marcus's license plate number from that year. The investigator called back in 4 days. Found it. November 17th. Hit and run. The driver struck a parked car on Peachtree Street and fled the scene. Witness saw the vehicle. Partial plate match. But the case was never solved because the witness description was too vague. Can you get me a copy of the police report? Public record. I'll send it over. That night, I read the report 3 times. The damaged car belonged to a single mother. She'd filed an insurance claim but had to pay the deductible herself. $800 she couldn't afford. Because Marcus had run. I made a copy of the report. I printed out Marcus's social media posts. I compiled a timeline. Then I sent everything to the Atlanta Police Department. Not to Detective Morris. To the Hit and Run Division. With a simple note. I believe I have information about an unsolved case from 3 years ago. I also did something else. I called the single mother. Her name was Jennifer Hayes. Ms. Hayes, my name is Ellie Carter. You don't know me, but 3 years ago, your car was damaged in a hit and run on Peachtree Street. Yes, I remember. Why are you calling? Because I know who hit your car. Silence. You do? Yes. And I'd like to reimburse you for your deductible. And for any other costs you incurred. I don't understand. Who are you? I'm the mother of the man who hit your car. Another silence. Why would you do this? Because it's the right thing to do. And because my son should have done it 3 years ago. Is he going to be arrested? I don't know, but if the police contact you, I hope you'll cooperate with their investigation. I will. I sent her a check for $2,000. She called me crying when she received it. Thank you, she said. You have no idea what this means. I think I do. The police contacted Marcus 1 week before the competency hearing. They wanted to interview him about the hit and run. He called me immediately. What did you do? I gave the police information about a crime. You reported me? I reported a hit and run. The fact that you were the driver is your problem, not mine. You're trying to sabotage me before the hearing. No, Marcus. I'm holding you accountable for your actions. This is insane. You tried to have me declared incompetent. Did you think I wouldn't fight back? He hung up, but 10 minutes later, he called again. Mom, please, I'll drop the competency petition. Just call off the police. I can't call off the police. I reported a crime. What they do with that information is up to them. You're destroying my life. You tried to destroy mine first. That was different. How? Silence. He had no answer. 3 days later, Marcus withdrew the competency petition. The hearing was cancelled. Detective Morris called to inform me. Your son has dropped his complaint, Mrs. Carter. The investigation is closed. Thank you, Detective. Although I should mention, he's now facing potential charges related to an old hit-and-run case. I heard. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? I'm a concerned citizen who reported information about a crime. A pause. Then a small laugh. Right. Well, have a good day, Mrs. Carter. Marcus didn't call me for 2 weeks after that. When he finally did, his voice was different. Smaller. Defeated. The police are charging me. Leaving the scene of an accident. I'm going to lose my driver's license. Probably have to do community service. I see. Are you happy now? No, Marcus. I'm not happy. I'm disappointed that it took this long for you to face consequences. I made a mistake. You've made many mistakes. This is just the first one catching up to you. He was quiet for a moment. What do you want from me? I want you to grow up. I'm 35 years old. Then act like it. Silence. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For the competency petition. For everything. Are you sorry you did it? Or are you sorry you got caught? Another silence. I don't know anymore. At least that was honest. Marcus, I'm going to give you $1,500 a month. The same as your siblings. It's enough to survive, but you're going to need to work. And you're going to need to pay back Jennifer Hayes personally. Who? The woman whose car you hit. You want me to pay her back? You already sent her money. I paid your debt. Now you're going to apologize. And you're going to do it in person. Mom, those are my terms. Take them or leave them. Long silence. Then, I'll take them. Good. Ms. Hayes's phone number is in the email I'm about to send you. Call her. Set up a meeting. And Marcus? Yes? When you apologize, mean it. Because if she calls me and tells me you were insincere, the money stops. I hung up. James was sitting across from me. 3 down, 1 to go. Sarah, what's her weakness? I thought about my youngest daughter. Beautiful, charming, manipulative. Sarah was the most dangerous one. Because Sarah knew how to play victim. Her weakness is her vanity, I said. How do you use that? By taking away the one thing she values most. Which is her image. Sarah's entire life was built on appearances. Designer clothes, luxury vacations, expensive restaurants. She documented everything on Instagram. 14,000 followers. She'd built a personal brand as a lifestyle influencer. Except her lifestyle was funded entirely by credit cards and our money. I went through her Instagram page carefully. She'd posted about a vacation to Turks and Caicos 6 months ago. Living my best life. #blessed, #luxury, #travel. But I knew for a fact she'd asked us for $5,000 that same month. Emergency medical expenses, she'd said. I'd sent the money without question. Now I wondered how much of her best life we'd actually funded. I called her credit card companies. All 7 of them. I'm calling about my daughter Sarah Carter. She's listed me as a reference on her credit application. I need to remove my name from her account. One by one, I severed my connection to her credit. Then I did something else. I called the bank where she kept her checking account. The account I'd set up for her when she was 18. The account that still had my name on it as a joint holder. I'd like to remove all funds from this account and close it. Mrs. Carter, there's currently $87 in the account. I'll take it. Sarah called me that afternoon. Mom, my credit cards were all declined. All of them. And my bank account is closed. What's happening? I removed myself from your credit applications. And I closed the joint account. You can't do that. Actually, I can. It was my account. But that's my money. There was $87 in that account, Sarah. I'll be happy to send you a check. Silence. Then, why are you doing this? Because you need to learn to live within your means. I can't survive without credit cards. Then get new ones. In your name only. Based on your income. My income won't qualify for enough credit. Exactly. She started crying. I'm going to lose my apartment. I'm going to lose everything. Then you'll need to make changes. What changes? Move into a shitty apartment? Stop going out? Delete my Instagram? If that's what it takes. You're ruining my life. No, Sarah. I'm showing you what your life actually is without my money. She hung up. But Sarah wasn't done. 2 days later, I received a call from a reporter. Mrs. Carter? This is Jessica Wu from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I'm doing a story about financial elder abuse. Your daughter Sarah has come forward with allegations that you've cut her off financially despite promises of support. My stomach dropped. No comment. She says you're using money to control your children. That you're vindictive and cruel. Would you like to respond? No comment. She's willing to go on record. With her name and photo. I hung up. Then I called Robert immediately. Sarah's talking to the press. What? She's claiming elder abuse. Financial manipulation. She's going public. Can she do that? Legally? Yes. It's not slander if she frames it as her personal experience. So what do we do? Robert was quiet for a moment. We tell our side. What? You have the recording, Ellie. The one from the hospital. If she wants to go public, we go public too. I thought about it. The recording was my nuclear option. Once it was out there was no taking it back. But Sarah had forced my hand. Do it, I said. Robert contacted the reporter. My client would like to provide context for your story. She has audio evidence of her children discussing her death as a financial windfall while she was hospitalized. She's willing to share this recording if you're interested in the full story. The reporter called me back within an hour. Mrs. Carter, I'd like to hear the recording. I sent her a copy. She called back 2 hours later. Her voice was different. Mrs. Carter, I'm going to need to speak with all 4 of your children for this story. This is not what Sarah described. I understand. Do you want this published? I closed my eyes. Did I want the world to know what my children had said? Did I want them publicly humiliated? Yes, I did. Publish it, I said. The article ran 3 days later. Front page of the lifestyle section. When children count inheritance before parents die, one family's devastating story. The recording was embedded in the online version. Complete transcript in the print edition. Sarah's face. Her quotes about financial abuse. Followed by her voice in the recording. It would have been so convenient if the accident had been worse. The backlash was immediate. Sarah's Instagram was flooded with comments. Angry comments. Disgusted comments. She lost 4,000 followers in 24 hours. Her employer called her in for a meeting. Someone started a hashtag Sarah Carter is trash. She called me sobbing. You destroyed me. You completely destroyed me. You tried to destroy me first. I was just trying to survive. By accusing me of abuse in the press? You left me no choice. You had a choice, Sarah. You could have gotten a job. Cut your expenses. Lived within your means. Instead, you tried to manipulate public opinion. I hate you. I know. She hung up. But 10 minutes later, she called back. What do I have to do? What? To get the money. To fix this. What do I have to do? I took a deep breath. Delete your Instagram. What? Delete it. All of it. The fake life. The luxury posts. The lies. That's my career. Your career is pharmaceutical sales. Instagram is your fantasy. Silence. If I delete it, will you give me the monthly allowance? Like Denise and Marcus? Yes. $1,500? Yes. Long pause. Fine. That night, Sarah's Instagram went dark. Account deleted. 14,000 followers gone. Her entire digital life erased. James and I sat on the balcony. All 4 of them, he said quietly. All 4. How do you feel? I thought about it. Powerful. Sad. Relieved. Angry. All at once? All at once. We sat in silence for a while. What happens now? James asked. Now they learn to live on $1,500 a month. And then? And then we wait to see if they've actually learned anything. What if they haven't? I looked at him. Then they get nothing. Because I'd won. I'd systematically dismantled each child's sense of entitlement. I'd forced them to face consequences. I'd proven I wasn't weak. But the war wasn't over. Not yet. Because there was still one more lesson to teach. The most important one. Obedience. 6 months passed. 6 months of my children living on $1,500 a month. 6 months of watching them struggle. 6 months of waiting to see if they'd learned anything. Denise kept her job at Starbucks. She worked 40 hours a week. Sometimes more. She posted about it once on Facebook. 6 months sober from debt. It's hard, but I'm doing it. 32 people liked it. I was one of them. Michael and Amanda moved into a smaller rental. 3 bedrooms, 1,200 square feet. The kids shared a room. Michael worked 2 jobs. Days at a commercial real estate office. Nights doing security at a warehouse. Amanda started a blog about living frugally. How we survived financial collapse and found happiness. It had 400 followers. I read every post. Marcus completed his community service. 120 hours picking up trash on the highway. He posted a photo on the last day. Orange vest. Garbage bag. Exhausted smile. Done. Never again. The comments were surprisingly supportive. People love a redemption story. Sarah got a roommate. A 25-year-old nurse named Kelly. They split a 2-bedroom apartment in a less expensive part of town. Sarah stopped wearing designer clothes. She stopped going to expensive restaurants. She started packing lunch. Her coworker told me this when I called the office pretending to send flowers. Sarah? Oh, she's great. Really turned things around this year. Very focused. I watched all of this from Savannah. Through social media. Through phone calls to their employers. Through my private investigator. James thought I was obsessed. You check on them every day. I'm making sure they're actually changing. Or you're looking for a reason to punish them more. I didn't answer. Because maybe he was right. Then, on a Tuesday morning in March, I received a letter. Hand-delivered. All 4 signatures. Mom and Dad, we'd like to visit. We need to talk. We're ready to apologize properly. Please give us a chance. We'll drive down this weekend if you'll see us. I read the letter 3 times. James read it over my shoulder. What do you think? I think they're still broke. And they want more money. Maybe. Or maybe they're actually sorry. We'll see. I texted back a single word. Saturday. They arrived at 11 a.m. 2 cars. All 4 children. They looked different. Denise was thinner. No makeup. Hair in a simple ponytail. Michael had gray in his beard. Wearing jeans and a polo shirt instead of an expensive suit. Marcus looked tired, but healthier. Like he'd been sleeping better. Sarah looked almost unrecognizable without the designer clothes and perfect hair. I let them in this time. They stood in my living room, awkward and uncertain. Sit, I said. They sat. James stood behind me. Silent support. Denise spoke first. Mom, Dad, we came here to apologize. Really apologize. Not because we want something. But because we owe you that. I didn't respond. Michael continued. We've had 6 months to think about what we did. What we said. And we're ashamed. Marcus nodded. I tried to have you declared incompetent. I tried to take away your rights. That was unforgivable. Sarah was crying already. I went to the press. I tried to destroy your reputation. I was horrible. I let the silence stretch. They sat there, waiting. Finally, I spoke. Is that it? Denise blinked. What do you mean? Is that your apology? A few sentences about being ashamed? We're truly sorry, Mom, Michael said. For what specifically? They looked at each other. For what we said at the hospital, Denise said carefully. Say it. Say what you said. Mom, we don't need to. Yes, you do. If you're actually sorry, you'll say exactly what you apologized for. Long silence. Then Marcus spoke quietly. We talked about your death like it was a business opportunity. We calculated your net worth. We discussed how convenient it would be if the accident had been worse. And? Sarah wiped her eyes. We laughed about it. We were happy you were hurt because it meant we'd get our inheritance sooner. I felt tears burning in my own eyes. But I didn't let them fall. Do you understand what that did to me? Hearing my own children say those things? Yes, Denise whispered. Do you? Do you really? Mom, we were horrible people, Michael said. We were greedy, entitled. We took everything you gave us and wanted more. We didn't appreciate you. We didn't love you the way we should have. And now? I asked. Now we understand, Marcus said. These 6 months have been hell. But they've also been clarifying. We know what it's like to struggle now. To worry about money. To work for everything. And you think that's enough? They looked confused. Enough for what? Sarah asked. Enough for me to forgive you. Silence. Denise leaned forward. Mom, we're not asking for forgiveness. Not yet. We know we have to earn that. We just wanted you to know that we're trying. We're changing. And we love you. Really love you. Not your money. You. I studied her face. She looked sincere. They all did. Stand up, I said. They stood. Come here. They came closer. I looked at each of them in turn. Denise, 38 years old. Barista. Michael, 41 years old. Working 2 jobs. Marcus, 35 years old. Community service complete. Sarah, 33 years old. Roommate named Kelly. My children, I appreciate your apology, I said carefully. I do. And I'm glad you've learned something from these past 6 months. Relief flooded their faces. But I'm not ready to forgive you. The relief vanished. Mom, Denise started. You hurt me. Deeply. And 6 months of struggling doesn't erase that. What more can we do? Michael asked. Keep struggling. Keep working. Keep proving that you've changed. Maybe in another 6 months, we'll talk again. Another 6 months? Sarah's voice cracked. Or a year. Or 5 years. I don't know yet. So you're just going to make us suffer indefinitely? Marcus asked. His voice had an edge to it. The old Marcus. The entitled one. I'm not making you do anything, I said coldly. You're free to walk away. Get jobs. Build lives. Without me. Without my money. We don't want your money. Denise said desperately. Then why are you here? Silence. Because we both knew the truth. They did want the money. Maybe not only the money. But definitely the money. I think you should leave, I said quietly. Mom, please, Sarah begged. Don't do this. Do what? Shut us out again. I'm not shutting you out. I'm just not ready to let you back in. James stepped forward. Kids, your mother needs more time. We both do. What you said. What you did. It broke something. And broken things don't heal overnight. Dad, we're trying, Michael said. We know. And we're proud of the progress you've made. But trying isn't the same as succeeding. Come back in 6 months. Show us 6 more months of growth. Then we'll talk. They stood there for a long moment. Then, one by one, they nodded. Denise hugged me. I let her. But I didn't hug back. Michael shook James's hand. Marcus looked like he wanted to say something. But he didn't. Sarah was crying as she walked out. The door closed. James and I stood in the empty living room. That was hard, he said. It needed to be hard. Do you really want them to come back in 6 months? I thought about it. I don't know. Maybe. Ellie. They're getting better, James. But better isn't good enough. Not yet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the visit. Their faces. Their words. Their apologies. Were they sincere? Or were they just better actors now? At 3 a.m., I got out of bed and went to the balcony. The river was dark. Peaceful. James found me there. Can't sleep? No. What are you thinking about? Whether I'm being fair. Fair to them? Fair to anyone. Maybe I'm just a bitter old woman punishing her children because they hurt her feelings. James sat down next to me. You're not bitter. You're hurt. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. Bitter people want everyone to suffer. Hurt people want justice. And which one am I? He took my hand. I think you're somewhere in between. And I think that's okay. We sat in silence for a while. Then James said, what if they really have changed? Then they'll keep changing. And eventually, I'll believe them. And if they haven't, then they'll slip up. And I'll know. But the truth was, I didn't know what I wanted anymore. I'd spent 6 months punishing them, controlling them, watching them suffer. And part of me had enjoyed it. That's what scared me most. Not that my children were greedy. But that I discovered I liked having power over them. 2 weeks after their visit, Denise called. Mom, I just wanted to let you know. I paid off my last debt. All of it. I'm completely debt-free. That's wonderful, Denise. It took 6 months, working 60 hours a week sometimes. But I did it. I'm proud of you. Silence. Are you? Really? Yes. Then why does it feel like you're still punishing me? I didn't have an answer. Denise, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know what I said was unforgivable. But at some point, Mom, you have to decide. Do you want a relationship with us? Or do you just want revenge? I don't know, I said honestly. Well, figure it out. Because we can't keep living like this. In limbo. Never knowing if you'll ever let us back in. She hung up. I sat there holding the phone. James was watching me from the kitchen. What did she say? I told him. He nodded slowly. She's right, you know. I know. So what are you going to do? I looked out at the river. What was I going to do? Forgive them? Let them back in? Trust them again? Or keep them at arm's length forever? Keep controlling them with the threat of cutting them off? Keep wielding my power like a weapon? I don't know, I said finally. But I was going to have to decide. Soon. Because Denise was right. We couldn't live in limbo forever. And then, 2 days later, the decision was made for me. The phone rang at 7 a.m. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. Hello? Mrs. Carter? This is Piedmont Hospital in Atlanta. Your son Michael was brought in an hour ago. He collapsed at work. We need you to come immediately. My blood went cold. What happened? He had a heart attack. He's in surgery now. It's serious. I dropped the phone. James grabbed me. What? What is it? Michael. Heart attack. We need to go. Now. We were in the car in 5 minutes. 3-hour drive to Atlanta. I called Denise on the way. She was already at the hospital. Crying. Mom, they said it was massive. They don't know if he's going to make it. 41 years old. My son was 41 years old. And he might die. Because of stress. Because of working 2 jobs. Because I'd taken everything away from him. I'm coming, I said. I'll be there in 3 hours. Mom, I'm scared. I know, baby. I know. I hung up. James was driving 90 miles an hour. I sat in the passenger seat, shaking. What had I done? We arrived at Piedmont Hospital at 10:30 a.m. I ran through the parking lot. James struggled to keep up. Inside, Denise was in the waiting room. Her face was blotchy from crying. She stood when she saw me. Mom. I grabbed her, held her tight. Where is he? Still in surgery. They've been operating for 4 hours. Marcus and Sarah arrived 20 minutes later. We all sat together in the waiting room. Not speaking, just waiting. At noon, a surgeon came out. Dr. Patel. Young. Tired looking. Family of Michael Carter? We all stood. He's alive. The surgery was successful. We were able to repair the damage and restore blood flow to his heart. Relief crashed over me like a wave. Can we see him? Not yet. He's in recovery. It'll be a few hours. But I need to talk to you about his condition. We sat down. Dr. Patel pulled up a chair. Michael had a major heart attack. We call it a STEMI. A complete blockage of one of the main arteries. He's lucky he was at work when it happened. His coworker called 911 immediately. If he'd been alone, he likely wouldn't have survived. I felt my chest tighten. What caused it? James asked. Multiple factors. High cholesterol, high blood pressure, family history. But the biggest factor was stress. Stress. The word hung in the air. Michael's been under extreme stress, drive. Patel continued. His body was in a constant state of fight or flight. That puts tremendous strain on the heart. Will he be okay? Denise asked. He'll need significant lifestyle changes. Medication, diet, exercise, stress management. And he absolutely cannot continue working the hours he's been working. What hours? I asked quietly. Dr. Patel looked at his chart. According to his wife, he's been working 2 jobs. Approximately 70 to 80 hours per week. For the past 6 months. 70 hours. Because I'd taken away his financial safety net. Because I'd wanted him to suffer. If he continues at this pace, drive. Patel said, he'll have another heart attack. And next time, he might not survive. The doctor stood. You can see him in about 2 hours. But family only. 2 visitors at a time. And please, keep it brief. He needs rest. He left. We sat in silence. Then Sarah spoke. This is your fault. I looked at her. What? You heard the doctor. Stress. You did this to him. Sarah, Marcus warned. No. She needs to hear this. You took everything from us. You forced Michael to work himself to death. And for what? To prove a point? That's not fair, Denise said quietly. Isn't it? She's been punishing us for 6 months. And now Michael is lying in a hospital bed because of her. Michael is in a hospital bed because he wished I was dead, I said coldly. He didn't mean it. Yes, he did. You all did. We were horrible, Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. We were greedy and awful. We said terrible things, but we apologized. We've been trying, and you just kept punishing us. You wouldn't forgive. You wouldn't let go. And now look what happened. I stood up. Don't you dare put this on me. Who else should I put it on? You're the one who cut us off. You cut yourselves off the moment you stood in that hallway discussing my death. Mrs. Carter. A new voice. Amanda, Michael's wife. She was standing in the doorway. I didn't know how long she'd been there. Amanda, I said softly. She walked over to me. For a moment, I thought she was going to slap me. Instead, she took my hand. Can we talk? Privately? I nodded. We walked to a quiet corner of the waiting room. Amanda's eyes were red but her voice was steady. I need you to know something. This isn't your fault. Amanda, no. Listen, Michael has been struggling with high blood pressure for 3 years. His father died of a heart attack at 52. The doctor told him he needed to lose weight, reduce stress, take his medication. He ignored all of it. But the stress was already there, Amanda said. Yes, losing the house made it worse. Yes, working 2 jobs was hard. But Michael chose that. He could have downsized differently. He could have asked for help. He could have been honest with me about his health. I still took away his safety net. You did. And that was hard. Really hard. But you know what? It also saved our marriage. I looked at her, confused. What? Before all this, Michael and I were falling apart. He was never home. Always working, always stressed, always worried about money. The kids barely saw him. I was angry all the time. We were headed for divorce. She wiped her eyes. These past 6 months, he's been home more. We talk now. We eat dinner together. The kids see their dad. We're not wealthy, but we're happy. For the first time in years, we're actually happy. Then why did he work 2 jobs? Because he's stubborn. He wanted to prove he could do it on his own. He didn't want to admit he needed help. That's Michael. That's always been Michael. She squeezed my hand. So yes, you took away his money. But you didn't cause this heart attack. His own choices did. I started crying. Finally, after 6 months of holding it together. After 6 months of being strong and cold and vengeful. I broke. Amanda held me while I sobbed. 2 hours later, they let us see Michael. 2 at a time. James and I went first. He was in ICU. Tubes everywhere. Monitors beeping. But he was awake. Mom. Dad. His voice was weak. I took his hand. Don't talk. Save your strength. Need to tell you something. Michael, please. Rest. No. Need to say this. He took a shaky breath. I'm sorry. For what I said. What I thought. You were right. About everything. I was entitled. Greedy. I didn't appreciate what I had. Michael, let me finish. These past 6 months. Hardest of my life. But also, the best. I know that sounds crazy. But it's true. Tears rolled down his cheeks. I was drowning before. In debt. In stress. In stuff I didn't need. And I blamed everyone but myself. But you forced me to face it. To deal with it. And now I'm free. You nearly died, I whispered. I know. And that's my fault. I pushed too hard. Tried to prove something. But the heart attack? That's not on you, Mom. That's on me. James was crying now too. Son, we love you. We've always loved you. I know, Dad. I know. And I'm sorry I forgot that. Michael looked at me. Can you forgive me? Eventually? I squeezed his hand. Yes, I can. We stayed for 10 minutes. Then the nurse made us leave so he could rest. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall. James held me. What are we doing? I asked. What do you mean? This whole thing. The revenge. The control. The punishment. What's the point if it almost kills them? James was quiet for a moment. The point was to teach them a lesson. I think they've learned it. So what now? I looked through the window at Michael's room. My son, lying in a hospital bed. Tubes and wires. Alive, but barely. Now we let go, I said. Let go of what? The anger. The revenge. The need to make them suffer. Are you sure? No. But I'm tired, James. I'm so tired. That evening, all 4 children gathered in the waiting room. Michael was stable. Sleeping. Amanda had gone home to check on the kids. It was just us. The family. I need to say something, I announced. They looked at me. Wary. Uncertain. These past 6 months, I've been angry. Hurt. Vindictive. I wanted you to suffer the way you made me suffer. No one spoke. And you did suffer. You lost your businesses, your homes, your lifestyles. You struggled. You worked hard. You faced consequences. I took a deep breath. But today, I almost lost my son. And I realized something. I don't want revenge anymore. I want my family back. Denise started crying. I'm not saying I forgive you completely. I'm not saying everything goes back to the way it was. But I'm willing to try. If you are, what does that mean? Marcus asked carefully. It means we rebuild. Together. Slowly. With new rules. New boundaries. But together. What kind of rules? Sarah asked. I pulled out a folder. Inside were 4 copies of a document. I had Robert draft something. It's not the financial guardianship contract. It's simpler. A family agreement. I handed each of them a copy. This agreement states that you acknowledge your past behavior. You commit to ongoing therapy. You commit to financial transparency. And you agree to specific conditions for receiving family support. What conditions? Denise asked, reading through the document. Monthly family meetings. Proof of employment. No luxury purchases without approval. And most importantly, honesty. Complete honesty. About everything. And if we sign this? Michael's voice came from the doorway. We all turned. He was standing there in a hospital gown, leaning on Amanda. Michael, you should be in bed. A nurse rushed over. I needed to hear this, he said. Dr. Patel appeared. Mr. Carter, you cannot be walking around. Just give me 2 minutes. The doctor sighed but didn't argue. Michael shuffled over to us. If we sign this, Mom, what happens? I looked at my son. Pale, weak, but determined. If you sign this, we start over. Fresh. The monthly allowance increases to $3,000 each. Enough to live comfortably. Not luxuriously, but comfortably. And when your father and I die, the inheritance gets split equally. As it should be. And if we don't sign? Sarah asked. Then you get nothing. And we go our separate ways. Silence. Then Denise stood up. Where do I sign? I handed her a pen. She signed without hesitation. Michael signed next. His hand was shaking but his signature was clear. Marcus signed third. Sarah was last. She stared at the document for a long moment. Sarah? I said gently. I'm trying to understand. After everything that happened, why now? Why forgive us now? I'm not forgiving you, not completely, but I'm choosing to move forward. Because life is too short. And family is too important. She signed. I collected the documents. 4 signatures, 4 commitments, 4 chances to rebuild. Now what? Marcus asked. Now we start therapy. All of us. Together and individually. We work through the pain. The anger. The betrayal. We learn to trust again. And if we can't? Sarah asked quietly. Then at least we tried. Dr. Patel stepped forward. This is very touching, but Mr. Carter needs to go back to bed immediately. We all laughed. Even Michael. Amanda wheeled him back to his room. The rest of us stood in the waiting room. For the first time in months, there was no tension. No anger. Just exhaustion. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of hope. That night, James and I drove back to Savannah. We didn't talk much. Both of us were processing. Did we do the right thing? I asked as we pulled into our driveway. I think so. Even after everything they did? Especially after everything they did. Because holding on to anger was killing you. Maybe not physically like Michael. But emotionally. I sat in the car for a moment after we parked. I spent 6 months making them suffer. They deserved it. Did they? Or did I just enjoy having power over them? James looked at me. Maybe both. But you're choosing differently now. That's what matters. Inside, I made tea. We sat on the balcony. The river was dark and peaceful. What happens if they break the agreement? James asked. Then we enforce consequences. But fair ones, not vindictive ones. You think they'll stick to it? I don't know. But I have to give them the chance. We sat in silence for a while. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Denise. Thank you, Mom, for giving us another chance. We won't waste it, I promise. I showed James. He smiled. See? Maybe they really have changed. Or maybe they're just better at saying what I want to hear. Ellie, I know. Trust but verify. But the truth was, I didn't know if I'd ever fully trust them again. The recording from the hospital would always be there. Their words, their laughter, their greed. I couldn't unhear it, but maybe that was okay. Maybe families aren't about blind trust. Maybe they're about choosing to love despite the hurt. Choosing to rebuild despite the cracks. Choosing to move forward even when you're not sure it's the right choice. I sipped my tea and looked out at the water. Somewhere in Atlanta, my children were sleeping. Tomorrow, they'd wake up with $3,000 in their accounts. Not because they deserved it, but because I was choosing mercy over revenge. And maybe that was the real victory. Not crushing them, but learning when to stop. 2 years later, I'm standing in the kitchen of our old house in Marietta. The house we sold 2.5 years ago. The house we swore we'd never return to. But here we are. James bought it back 6 months ago. The California couple who purchased it were relocating again. They gave us first right of refusal. Full circle, James said when he signed the papers. I wasn't sure if that was poetic or depressing. Maybe both. Today is Thanksgiving. The entire family is coming. For the first time in 2 years, we're all gathering under one roof. I'm nervous. Denise arrives first. She's driving a used Honda. 6 years old. Reliable. She's still working at Starbucks. But she was promoted to shift supervisor 8 months ago. She also started taking night classes. Marketing degree. She'll finish in 2 years. Mom. She hugs me at the door. I hug her back. It still feels strange, but less strange than it used to. Michael and Amanda arrive next. Michael looks healthy. He lost 30 pounds, quit one of his jobs. Takes his medication religiously. He walks with a slight limp now. Residual effect from the heart attack. But he's alive. Their kids run past us into the house. Grandma, Grandpa. I kneel down and catch them. My grandchildren. I haven't seen them in person in 2 years. Marcus arrives with his girlfriend Kim. She's 8 months pregnant. They're getting married next month. Small ceremony. Justice of the peace. Marcus is working at a physical therapy clinic now. Good pay. Benefits. He completed an online certification program. I'm actually helping people, he told me last month on the phone. It feels good. Sarah is last. She arrives with her roommate Kelly. They're not just roommates anymore. They're partners. Sarah came out 6 months ago. I spent my whole life trying to be someone I wasn't, she said. I think that's why I needed so much stuff to fill the emptiness. Kelly is a nurse. Steady, kind. Sarah still works in pharmaceutical sales. But she's not the top performer anymore. She's okay with that. We gather in the living room. 9 adults. 3 children. The house feels full. Alive. Dinner is at 3 p.m. Turkey, stuffing, all the traditional dishes. Everyone helps. Denise sets the table. Michael carves the turkey. Marcus manages the kids. Sarah and Kelly make a salad. Amanda coordinates everything like a general. We sit down to eat. James says grace. Thank you for this food. Thank you for this family. Thank you for second chances. Several people wipe their eyes, including me. Halfway through dinner, Denise clears her throat. Mom, Dad, we wanted to tell you something. Everyone gets quiet. We've been talking, all 4 of us, and we wanted you to know that we're grateful for everything. The past 2 years have been hard, but they've also been the best thing that ever happened to us. Michael nods. I almost died, and it scared me straight. I'm healthier now than I've been in 20 years. My marriage is stronger. I actually know my kids. Marcus adds, I'm going to be a father. And I'm terrified, but I'm also ready, because you taught me what responsibility actually means. Sarah speaks last. I found myself, finally, and I never would have if you hadn't forced me to stop hiding behind money and image. I set down my fork. I'm glad you feel that way. But I need to be honest with you. They tense slightly. The past 2 years haven't been easy for me either. I've been in therapy, working through anger, guilt, control issues. Control issues? Marcus asks carefully. Yes, I enjoyed having power over you. More than I should have. And that scared me. Silence. Then James speaks. Your mother and I have made a decision. We're loosening some of the restrictions in the family agreement. 4 pairs of eyes widen. What restrictions? Denise asks. The financial transparency requirements. The approval for purchases over $1,000. The mandatory monthly meetings. Why? Sarah asks suspiciously. Because you've proven yourselves, I say simply. You've been responsible, honest. You've rebuilt your lives. You don't need us micromanaging anymore. Relief floods their faces. However, James adds, the therapy requirement stays. For all of us. And the honesty clause remains in effect. We can live with that, Michael says quickly. We finish dinner. Dessert is pumpkin pie. The kids are running around the backyard. The adults sit in the living room, talking. Really talking. About work. About struggles. About hopes. No one mentions money. No one calculates inheritance. We're just a family. Later, after everyone leaves, James and I clean up. That went well, he says. It did. Think it'll last? I don't know, but I'm hopeful. We finish the dishes and sit on the back porch. The same porch where we used to have coffee every morning. Before the accident. Before the hospital. Before everything changed. Do you ever regret it? James asks. The way we handled things? I think about it. Parts of it. I regret how long I held onto the anger. How much I enjoyed punishing them. But I don't regret teaching them consequences. Even though Michael almost died? That wasn't my fault. Amanda was right. He made his own choices. Still, it haunts me. Yes. We sit in silence for a while. Then I say, I made a decision. About what? The inheritance. James looks at me. I thought we already settled that. Equal split among the 4 kids. We did, but I'm adding something else. I pull out a document from my pocket. I had Robert draft this last week. It's a codicil to the will. James reads it. His eyebrows raise. Ellie, it's fair. It's controlling. It's protective. The document states that the inheritance will be placed in a trust, managed by an independent trustee. Each child will receive monthly distributions, but they cannot access the principal until they're 65 years old. You're still trying to control them from beyond the grave, James says quietly. I'm making sure they don't destroy themselves with sudden wealth. They've changed. People can change back. He looks at me for a long moment. You really don't trust them, do you? I think about the question. Honestly, I want to trust them. I'm trying to trust them. But that recording, James, I can't unhear it. I can't forget that they laughed about my death. That was 2.5 years ago. I know, but it's always there, in the back of my mind, whispering that they might just be pretending. James puts the document down. So what do? We sign this. We protect them from themselves. And we keep watching. For how long? Forever. He's quiet. Then he nods. Okay, if that's what you need. You don't agree. I think forgiveness means letting go completely. But I also think you've earned the right to protect yourself. So if this is what you need to feel safe, then okay. I lean against him. Thank you. For what? For not judging me. I could never judge you, Ellie. You're the strongest person I know. That night, I can't sleep. Again, I go to my office and open the safe. Inside is a folder. The folder contains the original recording from the hospital. Multiple copies, multiple backup locations. I haven't listened to it in over a year. But I keep it, just in case. I pull out the folder and hold it. This recording destroyed my relationship with my children. This recording gave me power over them. This recording changed everything. I should destroy it, burn it, delete every copy, let go completely. But I can't. Because what if I need it someday? What if they revert? What if this whole redemption story is just an elaborate con? I put the folder back in the safe, lock it, and walk away. In bed, James is snoring softly. I curl up next to him. He shifts and puts his arm around me. Can't sleep? Just thinking. About whether I'm a good person or a bad person. He's quiet for a moment. Then he says, "You're a human person." Which means you're both. That's not comforting. It's not meant to be. It's meant to be true. I close my eyes. Tomorrow, I'll wake up and drink coffee on the back porch. I'll call Denise to see how her classes are going. I'll text Michael to remind him to take his medication. I'll check Marcus's Instagram to see photos of the baby when she's born. I'll have lunch with Sarah and Kelly next week. I'll be a good mother. A loving mother. A supportive mother. But I'll also keep the recording. I'll also maintain the trust structure. I'll also watch them carefully. Because I'm not just a mother anymore. I'm a survivor. And survivors don't trust easily. 6 months later, I'm in the garden, planting tomatoes. James is trimming the hedges. We've fallen back into our old routine. Coffee at 7 a.m. Garden work in the morning. Lunch on the porch. Afternoon walks. Dinner at 6. It's peaceful. Almost boring. After 2 years of chaos, boring feels like luxury. My phone rings. Marcus. Hey, Mom. Just wanted to let you know, Olivia took her first steps today. I smile. That's wonderful. Send me a video. Already did. Check your email. We talk for 10 minutes. About the baby. About work. About nothing important. Just normal conversation. When I hang up, James looks over. Everything okay? Everything's fine. Olivia is walking. Our first walking grandchild in 2 years. Third walking grandchild overall. Still, it's nice to be part of it. That evening, we have dinner with Denise. Just the 3 of us. She tells us about her classes. I'm thinking about starting my own business again. Eventually. But this time, I'll do it right. Bootstrap it. Keep overhead low. No debt. That sounds smart, James says. I learned from the best failure, she jokes. After dinner, she helps me clean up. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you still have the recording? From the hospital? I freeze. Why do you ask? Because I think about it sometimes. What we said. How awful we were. And I wonder if you've forgiven us. Really forgiven us. Or if you're just tolerating us. I dry a plate slowly. I don't know how to answer that. Honestly would be good. I set down the plate and look at her. I want to forgive you. Completely. But I'm not there yet. And I don't know if I'll ever be. Her face falls. So you're just pretending? No, I'm not pretending. I love you. I'm proud of you. I enjoy spending time with you. But there's a part of me that's still guarded. Still protecting myself. From us. Yes. She nods slowly. I understand. I hate it, but I understand. Denise, what you said that night. It broke something in me. And broken things don't heal perfectly. They leave scars. So we're just going to live with this scar forever. Maybe. Or maybe time will fade it. I don't know yet. She's quiet for a moment. Then she says, I still have hope. That someday, you'll trust us again completely. I have that hope too. But you're not betting on it. I smile sadly. No, I'm not betting on it. She leaves shortly after. James finds me standing in the kitchen. Rough conversation? She asked about the recording. What did you tell her? The truth. That I'm still guarded. How did she take it? Better than I expected. Worse than I hoped. That night, I dream about the hospital. I'm lying in the bed. The door is open. I can hear my children in the hallway. But this time, they're not talking about money. They're crying. Genuinely crying. I can't believe we almost lost her. We should have told her we loved her more. When she wakes up, everything is going to change. I wake up with tears on my face. It was just a dream. A fantasy of what I wish had happened. But it didn't happen. Reality is the recording I keep in my safe. Reality is their laughter. Reality is the scars. I get out of bed and go to the office. Open the safe. Look at the folder. I should burn it. I know I should burn it. But I don't. Instead, I add something new. A note. Written in my own hand. To my children, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And you found this recording. I kept it not because I didn't forgive you, but because I couldn't forget. I hope you understand the difference. I love you. I always loved you, but I also always remembered. Choose to learn from this. Not to resent it. Mom. I seal the note with the recording. Put it back in the safe. And walk away. Because that's my choice. To love them. To support them. To give them opportunities. But also to protect myself. To remember. To stay cautious. Some people might call that unhealthy. Some therapists have called it unhealthy. But I call it survival. The next morning, James and I have coffee on the porch. What are you thinking about? He asks. About how long we have left. Morbid. Realistic. We're 74 and 76. We're not young. We're not dead either. Not yet. He takes my hand. Are you afraid? Of dying? No. I'm afraid of what happens after. You mean the inheritance. I mean whether everything we did mattered. Whether they actually changed or just learned to hide their greed better. We won't know until we're gone. Exactly. And that terrifies me. James is quiet for a while. Then he says, you know what I think? What? I think you did your best. We did our best. We taught them consequences. We gave them second chances. Whatever happens after we're gone is their choice. Not our responsibility. But what if they destroy themselves? Then they destroy themselves. You can't control them forever, Ellie. I know he's right. But knowing and accepting are different things. That afternoon, I go for a walk alone. Through our neighborhood. Past the houses where my children grew up playing. Past the park where we had birthday parties. Past the school where they learned to read. I think about the past 2.5 years. The anger. The revenge. The control. The gradual softening. The conditional forgiveness. The lingering doubt. And I realize something. I'm tired. So tired. Tired of watching. Tired of calculating. Tired of protecting. But I'm not ready to stop. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because that's who I am now. The mother who was betrayed. The woman who fought back. The survivor who never fully lets go. I walk home as the sun sets. James is on the porch, waiting. Where did you go? Just walking. Thinking. About? About the fact that I'm never going to fully trust them again. And making peace with that. He nods. Can you live with it? I don't have a choice. This is who I am now. And who's that? I sit down next to him. A woman who loves her children. But keeps receipts. He laughs. Actually laughs. That's the most honest thing you've said in months. Is it terrible? No. It's human. We sit in silence as darkness falls. Somewhere in Atlanta, my children are living their lives. Working. Raising kids. Going to therapy. Trying. And I'm here. Watching from a distance. Loving them. Supporting them. Never fully trusting them. Is that wrong? Maybe. Is it human? Definitely. Is it what I need to feel safe? Absolutely. And so I've made a decision. James and I are going to live as long as possible. We're going to eat healthy. Exercise daily. Take our medications. Do everything in our power to extend our lives. Not because we're afraid of death. But because the longer we live, the longer we maintain control. The inheritance sits in our estate. Growing. Waiting. But as long as we're alive, they don't get it. They get monthly allowances. They get support. They get love. But they don't get freedom from our oversight. Not until we're dead. And we're going to fight like hell to postpone that day. Some people might call that cruel. I call it consequences. They wanted us dead for our money. Now they get to wait. Indefinitely. While we watch. And judge. And remember. I look at James in the darkness. Promise me something. What? Promise me we'll live a long time. A really long time. He smiles. Why? Because I'm not done yet. Done with what? Being in control. He kisses my forehead. I promise. We'll live forever. Forever is a long time. Good. Because they need to learn that patience isn't just a virtue. It's a requirement. I lean back in my chair. Above us, stars are appearing. Somewhere, my children are looking at the same sky, wondering when they'll be free, when they'll inherit, when they'll finally escape our oversight. But the answer is simple. Not today, not tomorrow, not until James and I decide we're done. And we're not done, not by a long shot. Because they wanted us dead. So now they get to wait. Watch, wonder, while we live our best lives. Healthy, happy, in complete control, forever, or at least as close to forever as modern medicine